Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar as part of the KaiNexus Continuous Improvement webinar series. It's titled Building a Culture of Empowerment, Reflections on Lessons Learned. My name is Mark Graven from KaiNexus. I will be host and moderator today, and I'm very excited that we are joined by our presenter, Dr. Lisa Yerian from Cleveland Clinic. So Dr. Lisa Yerian is Chief Improvement Officer and a pathologist at Cleveland Clinic. Since joining them in 2004, she's held several pathology and health system leadership positions. And I'm going to detour from the formal bio for a minute and thank Lisa for being a friend and a colleague in learning together. I've been able to accept a few invitations to their Gemba, different Cleveland Clinic sites to go and see and talk through important issues around improvement and again learning from each other. So I want to acknowledge those opportunities and thank Lisa for that. I saw her give a keynote talk on stage at the AME annual conference in Dallas last October. It was basically this talk, and everyone was so blown away by the talk. I invited her to do, this is her updated version of it for the webinar today, and I'm very pleased that Lisa accepted that invitation. In her role as Chief Improvement Officer, Dr. Yerian leads a team of improvement professionals who build an improvement culture, and they also drive strategic improvements for patients and caregivers across Cleveland Clinic. So under her leadership, the Cleveland Clinic Improvement Model was developed, tested, and refined as the roadmap for the organization in their pursuit of improvement. Over the last decade, and you'll hear about this today, Dr. Yerian's team has engaged over 20,000 Cleveland Clinic caregivers in improvement efforts by developing capabilities across the organization and building systems to support patients and caregivers. Among other things, she serves on the board for both the Lean Enterprise Institute and Catalysis. So hello to our friends from those organizations who might be listening or watching today. Dr. Yerian received a Bachelor of Science from the University of Notre Dame. She completed her medical degree, residency, and fellowship in gastrointestinal and liver pathology at the University of Chicago Pritzker School of Medicine. With that, again, Lisa, thank you for accepting the invitation, and I will turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that kind introduction and for the invitation to be here. This morning, one of my team members shared a quote from Simon Sinek. And he said, the value of our learning multiplies when we share what we learn with others. So I want to say thank you to Mark, the KaiNexus team, and to really all of you listening in today for that opportunity to multiply the value of our learning and to share in yours. I'm really reminded of the need to do that every single day. But as we get started, I wanted to share you of a recent reminder of what's going on in healthcare. And it came through a Zoom call I had with a friend. My friend came late to this call. His face was flushed. I could see his eyes were wet with tears, and his voice cracked as he apologized for being late. He explained that his daughter had depression, and she had gotten worse, and more recently had become suicidal, and he was late because he had been trying to get her an appointment. But the soonest appointment that they were able to get was still a month and a half away. And so he apologized that he couldn't stay on the call and talk because he wanted to get back to the phone because he wanted to keep trying to call to get her help. And at the same time, he was trying to keep her from killing herself. My heart sank as he left that call. As a doctor and a healthcare leader, I felt responsible. But as a friend, I felt helpless. At the end of the day, I don't care about lean. I care about that. Despite all of our work and our best intentions, the evidence, I think, is extremely clear. Our healthcare system is broken. Today, 1 in 5 families report difficulty getting the care they need, even when they're seriously ill. And the care they do get, even in the best hospitals, is largely inadequate. This year, it's estimated 42 million people across the world will be harmed when they come into our hospitals. Over 3 million of those will be harmed here in the United States, where our life expectancy is in the steepest decline since the 1920s. We're seeing worse outcomes than our peers, and we're paying more to get them. And at the same time, burnout is rampant in healthcare. 56% of US public health workers report symptoms of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress. 8% report that they've contemplated suicide. 8%. Our patients aren't going away. The demand just keeps coming. What happens when our caregivers do? These problems in healthcare are big and they're complicated, no doubt, and they touch every single one of us. And I expect they're really not that different from the problems you're facing in your job, in your role, in your industry. Problems of safety, problems of quality, problems of people, taking good care of them. So what about improvement? Lean, continuous improvement, CI, OpEx, all of our terms and methods and tools and things that we do to try to make things better. For years, tons of smart, committed people have been working hard to change healthcare using these very methods. But in reality, we've struggled to achieve that kind of true cultural transformational sustained change that we seek. And I'm not talking about just doing an improvement project here or improving a process or even improving a value stream. Today, everybody can do that. Everybody knows how to make a process improvement. What I'm talking about is creating that really deep, impactful, lasting change that's deeply rooted in our culture and in operations, a change that sustains and grows and transforms an organization, and in doing so can change an industry. The kind of transformation that we know is possible and that healthcare so desperately needs, because today we're harming too many people and we're leaving too many people, like my friend's daughter, not able to get the care that they so desperately need. And in a work environment that's truly untenable for our caregivers. Sure, there are bright spots. We go to conferences. I was at one last week. We hear about journeys and successes and lessons learned, and we get inspired and we get excited. But in reality, strong, living examples of the kind of transformation that we can rely on, the kind that we're really seeking, are still really very few in healthcare or any of our industries. That kind of change, that sustained cultural transformation, has really proven elusive. And I wonder if we are ever able to confidently, reliably create that change that we're seeking. Many of us have been bitten by the improvement bug, and we love these methods because we know that done well, they give us the power to change the world. But anyone who's been in this field very long knows that that's certainly not a given. The change that we seek, not just improving something, which is exciting, but not enough. That change to create deep cultural, sustained transformation, a transformation that carries on and grows beyond us, is really difficult. And we'll only achieve it if we, the improvement community, the improvement professionals, really have the courage to find and face the real opportunities that exist in the way we seek to create cultural transformation. I don't care about any of these methods because I don't think the answer is going to be about them. I think improving improvement is going to be about us. Sam Phillips was an early American record producer who played a major role in the emergence of rock and roll. He worked with the likes of Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, B.B. King, and he was known, yes, for his success, but really for the way that he recorded with these artists. He would say, "Don't worry about the mistakes. It's about how they feel when the record stops playing. Do they want to play it again?" Sam wasn't seeking technical perfection. He wanted to create something that people wanted to experience over and over again. He knew that was the real goal, not technically perfect music. And that was about how they felt. And so it is with our work. Doing improvement better in a way that does impact, sustain, and grow, transforming an organization and industry, even changing the world, is about how people feel when they experience it. And when the record stops playing, do they want to play it again? And that's what I want to talk about today. How do we do that better? How do we engage more people in creating more value through real cultural transformational change that sustains? First, I want to talk about anchoring our work in purpose with a clear understanding and a constant focus on the problem we're trying to solve, that very problem of transformation itself, and why it's so incredibly important that we solve it. Then I want to talk about reflecting on our work with integrity, that true critical reflection, authentically seeking and sharing honest feedback about how we're doing. Are we getting closer? Are we getting further? Are we just driving activity, doing projects, maybe getting some wins, but not actually getting that sustained change that we want, that we need? And then finally, how do we solve for the challenges that we face in our transformation work with empathy? Now, I know we all care deeply about our people and about this work, but I wonder, how well do we actually show it when we face the real barriers to changing the way we work, the way we manage, the way we even lead? All with the intent of helping us all reliably create the type of true, impactful, and sustained transformational change that we know is possible, we believe is possible, across all of our organizations and really all of our industries. Because when the people working in them hear the improvement record, they want to play it again. When I first learned about lean, I loved it, absolutely all of it. And this is why. I grew up in rural southeastern Ohio. I was a first-generation college graduate, and healthcare was a luxury that many families, including my own, did not always have, especially good healthcare. The healthcare we did have was inconsistent, and sometimes it was dangerous. There were 66 people in my high school graduating class, and 4 days after our graduation, one of us, Jamie, died from a procedure that I now know he never should have had. 6 weeks later, the doctor called Jamie's parents to apologize. He said he couldn't live with himself for hiding the error. I became a doctor because I wanted to make a difference, not just for Jamie or for my family, but for all people who didn't get care, who didn't get good care because of the cost, or because they were afraid, or because it simply didn't exist where they were. But as I began to practice, I realized that as a doctor, I could only help maybe 40 or 50 people a day. When I learned about lean, I saw an opportunity to help truly millions, while at the same time elevating and respecting the worker, the caregiver, people like me and the people I cared about. And I realized that if we can learn from our work and share it with others, well, the opportunity was tremendous. I saw in these methods a real opportunity to change the world. So you can imagine the thrill I felt when finally I got my dream job, which was to build a culture of improvement across Cleveland Clinic, which is a really good not-for-profit health system. We have now 77,000 caregivers and provide almost 13 million outpatient visits a year in 4 countries. At that point, we had been doing improvement work for a few years, and it was good work, but we hadn't changed the culture. And we knew that the organizations who saw the greatest impact from this type of work had truly embedded improvement within their culture. They had everyone solving problems and eliminating waste every day. And we weren't that, but we thought that we needed to be. So I was absolutely ecstatic to start to do the kind of lean transformation work I had only heard about, read about. And I saw this as a chance to really make a difference. In my mind, this was the work that I was born to do. But this was also a pivotal moment because, as excited as I was also acutely aware that we had no idea how to do this. And we knew that there were some very real risks that we didn't know how to address. First off, we had no map to do this. There was no roadmap or set of directions. We just knew it had been really hard for so many people and organizations, especially in healthcare, but really anywhere, to create the kind of sustained transformational cultural change that we were seeking. And we had heard about lean transformations in healthcare that seemed incredible, amazing, magical, that only later entirely unraveled. And we had heard about activities, events, and trainings and certification programs. And we didn't think these things would work for us, but we really didn't know what would. And we had no mandate. Many people, especially at that time, and especially in healthcare, thought that a CEO mandate was essential to doing this kind of transformation work effectively. And we didn't have that. But now I actually think it's a good thing that we didn't. And the reason is that we still had to learn how to do this. Learning takes time, and it takes real partnership and honest feedback. And people don't give you honest feedback when there's a mandate from the CEO. I also don't like mandates because they can make people feel like victims, like people who were forced to do this. And we knew that for this to work, people couldn't be forced to do it or feel like victims of it. They had to want it and they had to own it. And a mandate would eliminate the opportunity for people to think and decide and make a choice. And in doing so, eliminate the potential power of making that choice. But finally, and most importantly, you can't mandate a culture. You can maybe mandate activities, maybe for a while. You can force people to huddle. You can probably force people to fill out cards. But how do you mandate trust or psychological safety or creativity or courage? These core things that we really needed to make this work. We still don't have a mandate, and we have not asked for one. Don't get me wrong, I asked for a lot from our leaders, but I've never asked for that. And this was all even more pressing because we have this incredibly strong organizational memory. And we knew that we only had one chance to do this. If it didn't go well, we wouldn't have another for a very, very long time, maybe ever. And there certainly wouldn't be another chance for me. So there we were, not knowing where to start, but knowing we needed to, and that how we started was going to be hugely important. I always thought that if I only knew more, if I had trained in this, maybe like many of you did, rather than in medicine, I would know what to do. I would know how to do this or how to manage this massive responsibility and opportunity that I had finally been given. Many years later, we had dinner with another organization. They wanted to kickstart their own cultural transformation. They'd heard about us, and they flew a group of leaders into Cleveland to see our tiered daily huddles and talk with us about their transformation plans. And during dinner, they excitedly talked about all their plans, and they were going to have kickoffs and parties and trainings and posters and slogans. They were planning all kinds of things, and we listened to it all, really fascinated by their energy and their enthusiasm and the incredible detail of their plans. But at the end of dinner, as the plates were cleared, that team finally paused. They wanted to know what we thought. And as I drew a long breath to begin to organize my thoughts into a useful response, my friend and colleague, Nate Hurl, simply asked, "What is the purpose of your transformation?" "Wow," they said. "That is a great question. We should think about that." They were planning a transformation without a purpose and spending all their time and energy on the what, detailing what they were going to do, but they hadn't considered the why. When we started, we were very fortunate to know others in this improvement community. And I had an early conversation with Mark Reich, who's an experienced lean leader from Toyota. And I told him we wanted to build this culture of improvement, perhaps because I was just so excited to be able to start, but also hoping, I think, that he would share this playbook or the secret map with me to help me figure out how to do this well. And he didn't. Instead, he said, well, Lisa, sounds like you need to do an A3 on that. So simple, yet so incredibly powerful. Do an A3. As I mentioned earlier, I thought this was a knowledge problem. I thought that if I just knew more, I would know what to do or how to do this in a successful way that was good for our patients and good for our caregivers, even good for the industry. But now I think that this problem can't be solved with knowledge alone or by jumping to solutions or simply copying what others were doing. We had to do our own thinking, and we had to anchor that thinking in our purpose. Mark gave us a tool that helped us do that and build a path to achieve that purpose in our own environment. His advice was incredibly powerful because I had heard of A3, but I had never done one. And I'm pretty sure I hadn't even ever seen one. So I got a book, same book that Mark's giving away today, and a large piece of paper, and got started. This is that A3. This was, at the time, incredibly novel in our organization, where everything comes in snazzy, polished PowerPoint presentations. This was very different from that. It was messy and it was clear at the same time. It was authentic. And yes, it did all the things an A3 does. It helped us understand barriers in our current state, and it helped us develop and test countermeasures. But I think even more importantly, it kept the purpose of that change, our transformation, in front of us all the time. And it wasn't viewed as a final product. People could actually see the thinking and they could contribute to that thinking. And I would see them lean in as I made notes as I was sitting and talking with them. And if I recognized that if I used a different color pen, that they could see how much their words were contributing to the thinking on that document. And I would see them lean in even more. So naturally, I continued to do that. And this was very different from how we usually work, where we bring a PowerPoint into a meeting and ask for an input and leave and feel good about checking the box because we asked for input, but we had no idea what was actually heard or incorporated from that conversation. And doing something very differently was really important for us because this was change. And although I was super excited about it, not everybody was, even in my own continuous improvement team. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, well, of course, we're lean people. Everybody knows you have to do an A3 to solve a problem. But I want to push on that a little bit and ask, do we really use our own best problem-solving methods for our own work? Or do we just tell others that they need an A3 to solve their problems or their processes? In my experience, it's actually pretty uncommon. I hear a lot of folks talk about it, and they'll say things like, yeah, we think that way, but it's just in our head. We're just not writing it down. What would happen if we did write it down? What Mark did for us, for me, and for us was invaluable. That A3 helped us to clarify our problem of transformation and anchor that change, that transformation, to a clear sense of purpose. And he did it so simply, so humbly. It wasn't a gotcha. He wasn't pointing off, he wasn't showing off or pointing holes in our work. Yes, I've seen that. It was just a nudge. It was just, here, stay on the path. It helped us find the path and stay there as we worked and learned and faced more and more problems. But this really isn't about that A3. I think it's about us, and I think it's about the path. I don't think the path to sustained cultural transformation is so clear that we can just go do it. I can share my A3 with you. I don't think it's going to help. We'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do 5S, we'll do standard work, we'll do visual management. That's not going to get us there. The path to sustained cultural transformation is really hard, and it's treacherous, and it is so easy to get off course. So how do we help each other across all of our industries find the path and follow it, stay on it. How do we help each other achieve that elusive, sustained cultural transformation safely, reliably, successfully? I don't know the answer, but I don't think it'll ever be about the what. I think it's about each of us doing our own thinking, anchored in a purpose that is clear and meaningful to you and the people you're working with. And even if you have that knowledge that I so coveted, I actually think it's really hard to do that on your own. We have been incredibly fortunate to get that initial nudge from Mark and so many others from this Mark and others along the path over the last decade. I want to ask, how do we all do more of what they've done for us, for each other? For us, the purpose of cultural transformation was our care. All 77,000 of us know that our care can be amazing, life-saving, truly awe-inspiring. It absolutely happens here every single day. But it isn't always that. And it fails here every single day. And we hate that. And changing that, consistently delivering on the promise of safe, timely, compassionate care for every single one of our patients, and creating a process that makes it possible to deliver that care for every single one of our caregivers, that was the purpose of our work. And we articulated a vision that we've held for 10 years to this day. Every caregiver capable, empowered, and expected to make improvements every day. It's all very deliberate and there's a lot packed in. Truly capable means that we're not just training you, but that you actually are capable of seeing problems and talking about them openly, or as a leader, creating an environment where others do talk about them openly. And it's about solving them to root cause. Empowered doesn't just mean you're permitted. It means we've thoughtfully created a clear, viable path to improving, to uncovering and solving problems that actually works. And that means making sure everybody has a time and a place and a method that they can use successfully. Unexpected means if you're not making things better, you're not meeting expectations. And then finally, it is truly every one of us. It's not a management thing or a leader thing or a frontline thing. It's not a clinical thing or a non-clinical thing. It's all of us. And our tagline became every caregiver, every day, which is a nice target for the organization and for each team to work towards and check progress against as we reflect on our work. Are we getting closer to that, or are we getting further away? And we've found that reflection to be incredibly important. In that initial A3, we developed countermeasures to the barriers we saw, but these were just hypotheses. We did not know if they would work or how well they would work or how to refine them and make them even better. And we could only learn that through true critical reflection, our own reflection and reflection with the teams that we were working with. And I don't mean checking the box and asking for feedback. I mean reflection with integrity. I recently met a leader from another health system. We were connected through a colleague. Again, they wanted to talk about tiered daily huddles. And the ask that I received was to help articulate the value of tiered daily huddles, which I heard as, help me convince my boss to do this. So I agreed and I get on the call, and turns out it's not their improvement team leader as I expected. It's their CEO. And she asked me to explain to her the value of tiered daily huddles. And she went on to explain that they have daily safety briefings and weekly operational calls, and they get together and talk about problems and safety in lots of different times and places. And she didn't see the value of adding one more thing to her team's already full plates, and she wanted me to tell her why she should. She was looking for an answer. I didn't really have one. So instead, I asked a question. The same question Nate had asked years ago. What is the purpose? Why do you want to do tiered daily huddles? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, I don't know you that well, but it sounds like you're already doing a lot of things to connect with your teams and talk about problems. I'm not sure if you need to do this. Can you tell me why you're considering it? Oh, she said, my improvement team told me to. And when they did, when I didn't see what it would add to what we already do, they asked me to talk to you so you could explain it to me. Now, please don't get me wrong. Don't go home thinking she said we don't need tiered daily huddles. We do tiered daily huddles. We love them. My point is that we don't do them because they were on a roadmap or a checklist for operational excellence or lean transformation. They serve a purpose. They solve a problem for us that we found through reflection. And without that clarity, I think all of us would feel just like that CEO, wondering why or how this new tool would help me solve my problems. No matter how cool tiered daily huddles are or how many presentations I see, I don't think any of us, including the CEO, is going to be interested in a countermeasure for a problem that we don't think we have. In the first team we worked with, the director of that team and I visited every Friday afternoon, and every week we would do two things. First, we would remind everyone, including ourselves, of the purpose of this work. What was the problem we were trying to solve? And then we would check, how are things going? What's working? What's not? How can we do this better? We did this for a couple of reasons. First, we wanted to practice and model the type of reflection, that PDCA cycle that we wanted to anchor into this new culture we were developing. But we also really just needed to learn. And that consistency in practice really helped us develop strong, trusting relationships with that team over time. And they eventually felt safe enough to tell us how it was going. They spoke openly, and that candor was really important because it helped us understand where we needed to develop other systems. So we started with problem solving because they talked about problems. But when they started to see improvement, they wanted to identify and prioritize and solve all of their problems on an ongoing basis. And that pull spurred the development of a Kaizen system that we now use across our organization today. And then they asked for help prioritizing which are the most important problems to solve, which spurred the development of an alignment system, something that might seem obvious to many of you, but was something that we never had at that point. In each case, we developed these systems because the team was experiencing a new challenge. So when we would introduce it, we all knew that we actually needed it and why we needed it. Never because our improvement team told us to, or because it was the next chapter in our lean playbook. We may all be seeking the same type of sustained cultural change, but our organizations, our current conditions, our barriers vary greatly from place to place. And because of that, the countermeasures, the tools, the systems, the behaviors, how, when, where you introduce them, how you explain them, also, I think, are going to differ tremendously. Even in the same industry, the same countermeasure can have a very different effect in a different situation. And I think we each have to figure that out for ourselves. Doing that requires really that initial thinking I talked about in the A3, but it also requires sincere, critical reflection and honest determination of the current conditions and where you are and where your teams are. Today and on an ongoing basis, as those teams continue to learn and grow, we say we want to meet people where they are, and I often wonder, do we actually know? I think the way that we know is through deliberate, critical reflection with integrity. And when we do critically reflect, we find all these problems that get in the way, and we have to solve those problems with empathy. Not just respect, and not just caring, but truly understanding and sharing the feelings of another. Sometimes the good news is those feelings are amazing and people see the potential and they really believe that their new world will be better. This is Sheila. She's a nurse manager in our inpatient dialysis unit, and her team made incredible progress. They reduced delays in treating patients. They eliminated the need to work mandatory overtime, and they reduced patient codes. That's when a patient stops breathing and their heart stops. This is bad. It's bad for patients. It's bad for caregivers. Many patients won't survive. They reduced the number of those events in their unit by 83%. I asked her what kept her committed to their improvement work, and she said, because I want the whole team to know, no matter who we are and what role we're in, we all have the ability to impact and to make a difference. For Sheila, the cultural transformation that we were engaged in enabled her to be even more for her team. She could engage, she could empower them, she could elevate them, she could make care better. That was what she was here for. And this type of reaction that Sheila had is probably the most rewarding thing I ever get to see in my work. When we started, I expected that we would improve care for our patients. I had no idea what it would mean for our people. This work can fundamentally change a person's sense of who they are and what they're capable of. But this type of cultural change can also be unattractive and actually quite threatening for many people. And some of the managers that we've worked with really struggle with it. And we needed to understand why so that we could work through it, solve that problem. And we spent a lot of time with those individuals. And in time, we began to understand that these individuals who were struggling didn't see their role as a manager like Sheila did, like someone who should be elevating and empowering their team. They saw themselves as heroes who rescued their team from problems. Being a hero was how they understood their role and the value that they provided to their teams and also to their patients. It was the value they saw in themselves. So what happens when those teams become empowered to solve problems on their own? What does that mean about me and my work? What we were asking these managers to do was uncomfortable and frightening. But we couldn't get frustrated with them for that, and we couldn't feel sorry for them. But this was a really important problem for us to solve, and it's not rare. To solve it, we needed empathy. What do I mean by that? Well, let's first talk about what I've seen sometimes and how we react and what it's not. For starters, I mean, it's not judging someone for not seeing things the way I see them or we see them. It's not getting annoyed or frustrated because they aren't doing what I want them to do, because they're not doing tiered daily huddles, for not doing what I think would be better. And it's not feeling sorry for myself, thinking that I'm a victim because I don't have more Sheilas in my organization, or because my leaders won't do what I want them to do. And it's not even sympathy. Sympathy is just pity, feeling sorry for someone. Empathy goes much further. Professor and author Brené Brown describes empathy in terms of a pit. Sympathy means you're in the pit and I'm looking down at you in the pit. And yes, it's crummy and I feel sorry for you, but I'm not going there. I'm not going into the pit myself. Empathy means going there. It means being willing to make that vulnerable choice to connect with you by connecting with something in myself that knows that feeling. I've been in that pit. I know that feeling. It's really crummy. It's cold. It's dark, and it's overwhelming. But I'm willing to go there to feel that again, to connect with you. In continuous improvement, we all love to be heroes. We get called for the most important and most vexing problems in the organization, and then we get to solve them. I love it. My team loves it. If anyone or anything threatens to take that away from me, I am terrified. I know exactly what the fear of losing the ability to be a hero feels like. I've felt it more times than I care to recall whenever my own role or work was questioned or threatened. It's not good. So we had to navigate some pretty big conversations about what being a hero really means with these managers and with ourselves, and how being heroic, rescuing others, means that someone else has to be helpless. And because we were in the pit too, we had to face some of those same realities and loosen our own grip on our hero status so that we could co-create an even better scenario where none of us is heroic and nobody is helpless. That's the only way we were going to get closer to every caregiver every day. So I shared with you what takes me into the pit. I'd ask you to do the same. You probably have an iPad or notebook sitting around there somewhere. Just jot down 1 or 2 words. What takes you into the pit? What creates that threatened, frightened, miserable, crummy emotion in you? What experience or memory knows what it's like to be in the pit? And the next time you're feeling annoyed or frustrated or victimized by the people you're working with to drive transformation in your own work, think about that word. Pull it out. Remember this webinar? I think it could help you go into the pit to truly understand and solve together for what's getting in the way of your transformation. So this is where we want to be. We're not there yet everywhere. All of our teams solving problems and pursuing improvement like this on their own everywhere. These caregivers are capable, empowered, and expected, and they want to do it again. They do it on their own. It's not easy to get there, but we know it's possible. We've seen it. For us, the key question is how to get there faster, how to ensure that all of our teams get there and stay there. Sam Phillips didn't think that was about technical perfection. It was about how they feel. I think Sam Phillips was onto something. And for us, how they feel keeps coming back to the way we do this work, with empathy, with integrity, and with a clear sense of purpose. We know the path is hard to transformation, even for people who know a lot. But the more we walk it in a thoughtful, careful, disciplined way, the more we nudge and share with each other, the easier it will be for the next person. And that's the way I think we're going to change healthcare and maybe your industry too. So I'll leave you a question. If we went into your organization to check, what would your people say about your lean transformation improvement work? Not an individual project, but the actual overarching cultural transformation. Is it something your organization loves doing, wants to do, talks about with energy and enthusiasm? When teams engage, does it sustain and grow? How do your people feel after they listen to the improvement record? Do they want to play it again? Thank you.
Lisa, thank you for really powerful presentation and remarks today. Thank you so much for doing that. We still have some time for questions to come in, and while people are submitting questions, got just a few announcements, so we'll have the remainder of the hour, about 15 minutes for Q&A and continued discussion. So if you can advance that for me, please. We invite you to attend upcoming webinars. If this is your first time here, welcome, and hope you will come back for more. If you would like to watch any of the past webinars, you can do so by going to kinexus.com/webinars. Look for the big webinars on demand icon. There's over 100 webinars in that library. They're all free to view. Our next webinar, and you can register now, today, if not now, but after our session at kinexus.com/webinars. It's going to be a second session talking about habits with Dr. Greg Jacobson and Morgan Wright, how to design organizational habits that propagate a culture of continuous improvement. So this will be more of a deep dive into the topic of habits. There's a webinar that they did recently in the on-demand library. I do want to mention also, if this is your first time attending one of our webinars, we encourage you to visit our website, kinexus.com. Our mission and passion at KaiNexus is to spread continuous improvement. We have a software platform that helps people do that. And if you're interested, please do check out our website. But I also want to tell you about some other free resources. First off, our blog. If you can advance that, please. At blog.kinexus.com. A couple of articles there every week. We encourage you to check that out. You can subscribe to get those sent to you via email. And then we also have a podcast. And you can find that at kinexus.com/podcast. You can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. The audio of today's session, if you would like to listen again on your drive home sometime or share it with colleagues in that format, that audio will be available in the podcast. All right, so with that, we have more questions coming in. Let me go back down to there. So Lisa, maybe first, there's a question here from Anne Marie. How would you present the importance of creating a culture like this in an organization that currently has the traditionally hierarchical culture, especially at senior leadership? I'm referring to cultures where those in frontline position are not encouraged to bring up improvements. Does this need commitment at the top, or can you start locally? What are your thoughts on that?
We didn't start with a CEO mandate, as I mentioned. I think the CEO might have known what my name was, but he certainly had no idea that we were starting this work. What happened with us was we needed to learn, as I mentioned. And in that initial team where we were learning, we began to generate results and enthusiasm from the team. And so it was those early results that enabled us to start to bring leaders down. So this team happened to be in finance. So the executive director I was working with was sharing it with the CFO. So then the CFO wanted to come down and see it when he heard about, things were going well. We were solving these problems that they'd been facing for a long time. And then if the CFO was coming, my boss wanted to come because, of course, how they work. So then they saw it and they were excited about it. And then they, in turn, took it to other leaders. At the same time, I was getting in front of executives really every chance I could and telling them what we were doing. So I was making very specific asks, which required a little bit of courage, but having started gave me something that I could speak to. This work is such that I think if we hadn't done anything and gone and talked about it, it sounds sort of theoretical and pie in the sky, and people are like, yeah, nice lady pipe dream. But when you've got something concrete and you've got pictures and you've got data showing improvement, then it's easy to say, hey, we've been working on something. Can I get 30 minutes on your calendar to explain it to you or to talk with you about it and get your reactions, insights, etc. Once you get that, then in that meeting, the next thing is, would you come and see it? So you're, asking for the next step, but I think you need to start somewhere. And I think it's hard to ask for that level of commitment until you've done something. So I would start wherever you can, learn whatever you can, figure out how to tell that story. And then that's how we began to get other people who are interested in. Ultimately, one of the visitors was our executive chief nursing officer, and I actually don't think that at that point the executives were that interested in the concrete results as they were in the enthusiasm they were sensing from the caregivers who were doing this work, who suddenly had this transformed sense of who they were and what they were capable of. And so that was really what was the hook to get more people to ask for it. And then I knew I couldn't do it everywhere at the same time. So having, a few more ended up being a pace that we could keep up with as we learned and continued to grow.
Thanks, Lisa. There's another question here. How do your teams sustain the positive improvements that they make?
Yeah, depends on what it is. For process changes, we have a change methodology. There's another book that we use heavily. It's the book Switch, and it's the subtitle something like How to Drive Change When Change is Hard, or How to Change Things When Change is Hard. It's
Chip and Dan Heath, right?
Yep, Chip and Dan Heath. And they talk a lot about methods to anchor change in the culture, to anchor change in the process. So we link it to habits. We try to change the environment. We really use all the things that we can think of, all the tools at our disposal. I would say that the process changes that are like sort of our operational processes. In some ways, those are a little bit easier because it's sort of hard to go back. And if we're not following it, it's a great opportunity to reflect with integrity, go ask, ask why. I think it's harder for some of the improvement related processes. I think it's easy to just start to be a little bit more rushed in your huddle, or it's easy to stop submitting Kaizen cards. And so I think it's a combination of the team's commitment and also figuring out what we can anchor to help make sure that we continue to stay on the right course.
When you talk about purpose and passion, I love the example that you shared. Things people working in healthcare care really deeply about: reducing codes, reducing other types of harm. When it comes to passion and motivation, I guess I'm asking for a comment. I'm not framing this as a question, but it seems intentional to not be talking about financial impacts, to be talking about cost in very direct ways. How do you help navigate the way you talk about different needs or goals or purposes?
Great question. So in that first team, they talked about problems. So we just worked on the problems they talked about, and they were all problems. This was a very foreign field to me. It was a data and analytics team. I didn't understand their problems, but I believed them, and that's what we worked on. In time, we began to realize that we needed a better way to do that. And so in our subsequent teams, we just began with the question, what matters most? So teams often will have, we've worked with teams where we ask them what gets in the way of delivering the care you want to, of doing the work that you want to, and they'll find hundreds of things. So then we say, okay, what matters most? How do we prioritize? And we ask them what they care about. And time again, it's about the patient. The finances at the end of the day are actually pretty separate from most of what our teams members do every day, right? There are downstream financial implications, but what we found is when you ask a team what matters most, they'll talk about keeping our patients safe, responding to our patients' needs, getting our patients' medications on time, all of those types of things. And that's what they begin working on. But those do have a financial impact, right? Because, quality care costs less than low quality care. Getting patients seen in a more timely manner typically enables us to see more patients, serve more patients, which has a quality benefit because we have tremendous demand. I'm sure many healthcare organizations do today. When we can see people more efficiently, then it does have a financial benefit, and we do track that and are disciplined in our processes. But our focus has just always been around what matters most to the team. And we've subsequently become better in our alignment system. And so those organizational goals do provide some additional information or clarity, but it's around caring for our patients, caring for our caregivers, and then caring for our organization.
Yeah. Thank you. And then the second part of Stephen's question, I sort of interrupted or interjected on. When you look evaluating or considering changes, how is that process managed to minimize risk to patients? We want to try something new. That can be scary, even if we have a hypothesis that it's going to be better. Could you talk about that a little?
So I always like to talk to our teams about the minimal testable unit. What's the absolute smallest test of change that we can embark on? And then we always try to have, depending on the nature of the change, a clinical pair of eyes to check and test. Okay, the nurse manager needs to weigh in if we're doing something that, has potential implications on the patient. I've seen our people tend to be very ambitious and aspirational. I'm sure you're shocked. And so they'll have an idea for a process change and they want to change it everywhere in the entire enterprise at the same time. And I'll be like, minimal testable unit. How can you test this in the smallest possible way? And Mark and I even had a little joke about that as we were starting the webinar. We were trying some new things and we talked about, okay, if this fails, what's going to happen and what's the downstream or what's the downside of that and how bad is it going to be? And we agreed that it wasn't that bad. So we were safe. But I think that type of conversation and then saying do we actually have enough evidence and how do we get that evidence? And it's not changing it everywhere. It's changing it. It's filling out the form once, even when it's not a patient, or it's trying it one day with one conversation or with one patient. It's really testing it in a very manageable way prior to getting to that big bang rollout.
Right. So a question here. First off, there's a statement in a wonderful presentation, Lisa. Thank you. And then the question is, how has Cleveland Clinic carved out time for caregivers to problem solve? There's a challenge in healthcare. Trying to find time without affecting patient care or other needs. How do you help people? Is that one of the problems they need to help solve?
It's absolutely one of the problems. And in the very first team, they somehow were able to create these blocks of times and then time to do improvement work and to learn how to solve problems. And then we went on to an inpatient unit, and it was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So we try to be as efficient as possible. And we always prepare people to say at the beginning is when it's the hardest, because you haven't improved anything yet, right? So when you go into that very first endeavor to improve something, you're going to have to work and learn, and it's going to feel painful, and you're kind of going on faith because you haven't actually seen it work yet in your environment or in your team. But typically, a little bit of leadership support to give them a little bit of space. Maybe you have a little less project work, or a little bit of a lighter assignment to do that. We've tried that. But in most cases, the time that's required doesn't have to be extensive. And I've seen people who say, oh, well, you need a whole week, or you need a half a day, or you need these hour-long meetings. You can actually do a lot in an E3 in 10 minutes. And you can if you're focused and deliberate, you can get a lot of learnings quickly. So I would say, yes, we try to create time, but I also try to really push on how much time do you really need to have an effective huddle if you are well organized and if you do focus on what matters most. It comes up a lot. Actually, people ask a lot for doctors' time. My experience is doctors have about the most flexibility of anybody in the organization, because they can kind of tweak and do their work when they want to or when they need to. And so we do have doctors who come forth and spend time and learning about A3s, participating.
All right. Well, Lisa, we're running short on time. So one question here, I don't know if it's a short answer, but have you found evidence of needing to provide incentives to individuals or teams around improvement, financial or non-financial incentives? Head nodding, no, for those listening to the podcast.
No, we don't do that. I'd be afraid to do it, scared to try it. We don't need it. The seeing and feeling the effect on your team and on the patients over and over and over again seems to be reward enough in itself. And incentives get really complicated really, really fast.
So it's not even worth there's no why do a minimum test of change? It's a solution that's not needed. There's no problem around.
I'm not facing that problem.
Right. Good.
But if you were facing it, maybe you should consider it.
Yeah. Maybe final question here. What do you think are some of the critical behaviors that lead to teams being successful with improvement?
I think that creating a safe space. So tiered daily huddles is one of the systems that we've built. And I think the behaviors aren't just to some degree, behaviors showing up at the same time and same place every day and asking your team how things are going, what's working well. But I think there are also behaviors that enable the team to know it's a safe space to actually talk openly about what they're experiencing. And I think some of those are the more subtle safety behaviors around, do I have a look on my face like I'm not happy to hear about this, or I'm tired of hearing about this, or I'm just tired, or I'm busy. I can do very subtle things to make folks believe that I am more or less interested, respectful, connected. I think it's those more subtle behaviors that I think really lead to success.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, thank you for a successful session today. There are many thank yous and comments in the chat. I really appreciate you accepting the invitation to come and do the session today. I knew people from all sorts of industries, not beyond healthcare, would gain a lot of insight from you today. And maybe I'll just wrap up with a comment that was in the chat from Michael. Just wanted to mention, he says, my family members and I are patients at the Cleveland Clinic, and on numerous occasions, I've seen temporary signs taped to walls in public areas with, for example, A3 meeting here, 2 p.m., and it's heartening to see evidence of that improvement culture there as a patient. So I know you're happy to hear that. But as we wrap up, Lisa, is there any final word you'd like to leave us with?
No, thank you so much. And if you learned something and you have some reflections on your own journey, please share them back with us. We share openly because I think we all have to figure this out together.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, again, thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.